Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB as we get you set for some real Argos football. It's been a long time. It's been a long off season. It's feeling like it's finally here, and you're going to feel it from today's show because we're not only talking about the double blue game that happened this past Monday, and we'll go into detail on that, what we saw, the quarterback play, etc., but we are getting you set for an Argos football game this Saturday. Exhibition game number 1 for the Argos as they start their preseason. The Montreal Alouettes, the game's in Montreal, Saturday night, 7:30 start. And it's just about football season. But before we get into all that, I want to tell you about Something in the Water. And I was thinking about Something in the Water Brewing today because it was such a gorgeous day. It was so hot outside, but there was a nice breeze. Liberty Village, if you go down to Something in the Water at Liberty Village, this sort of pedestrian walkway that they've got in front of the place, right by their patio. There's nothing better on a hot day like this, sitting out there on the patio. They've got a great selection of beer. There's always something new to try as well, along with their regular great beers. There's always something that they're working on that's coming out. So you got to get down there. And if it's not going to be before opening day, and it should be, but if it's not, you got to make sure you join us. Sunday, opening day. It's June 9th. It's a 7 o'clock start. That's the game time. But we'll be there a few hours beforehand at Something in the Water. Come down, join us. They've got a lot of big things planned, not just for that day, but all season long. Plus, we're going to have giveaways on this podcast. I'm really excited about Something in the Water being back with us this year, and it's going to be bigger and better than ever. JB, let's get into the double blue game to start things off. So, first of all, what do you think of this style scrimmage as an evaluation tool? Like from a coaching perspective, we've both gone through, jamborees and things like this. Like, how does this suit you for as an evaluator?
Well, I mean, I think it's okay. You don't get a lot of look at the line, and you don't really get any look at running back. But it is good. It is, I think, useful for the wide receivers and the secondary and the quarterback. It's interesting from the line perspective, as long as guys aren't getting bull rushed back into the quarterback. I think it's, you can see blitzes and you can see lines picking up blitzes. So you can definitely evaluate your offensive line from a blitz perspective, but I think other than that, it's really a defensive back, wide receiver, quarterback heavy experience.
I would argue that from a psychological perspective, it does simulate the game experience. Like you'll notice that we stood for the national anthem, for example. They went through the process. There's referees there. There's fans in the stands. There's a 20-second clock. You've got the game clock running for situations. So there are elements of it that feel like a real game, far more so than during team session where you're 12 on 12. Like that feels somewhat real, but this is a step up from that, a level up than that. But like you say, because of the it's not lack of contact all over, but it's certainly not full contact. You've basically got 3 levels. So there's what we saw at the double blue game where it's really just touch, except they're sort of live on the line. And then you've got thud, which these games used to be. Thud is more like it's live on the line, but you're wrapping. You're not taking one to the ground, but you are wrapping up the ball carrier. And then you've got full contact. And if you're our age and you grew up playing football, there was no such thing as thud or touch. It was Oklahoma drills every day and every practice. You were just taking everyone to the ground. That was just how it was. But in this day and age, you don't coach like that. You don't play football like that. And so this is the sort of safest version of that that you can do with minimal risk to injury. You got everyone out there wearing their Guardian caps, and it is live on the line. But like you said, the reason it's hard to evaluate line is it is live on the line, but it's not like they're cut blocking. There's nothing. You can kind of pass rush with wild abandon because you're not going to suddenly get chopped out at the knees or anything like that. They're not looking to lay you out on poles or anything either. There's a friendly element to this. So it's not the easiest. Linebackers are tough to evaluate. Running backs are almost impossible to evaluate because it's basically blown dead at one-hand touch. but we still get to see some things. So I actually think it is useful. But like you said, it's not the same as a preseason game. I think they'll get way more out of that, but the risk of injury goes up too. So before we get into the game itself, let's just go through some of the stats. I wasn't planning on doing this as part of our pod, but I had a lot of questions about stats. You and I kept stats throughout this game as best we could, JB. I think we're pretty accurate, but it's tough, especially the defensive stats. But here's what I got offensively. So you had 3 quarterbacks playing: Cameron Dukes, Brian Scott, Nick Arbuckle, the newly signed Nick Arbuckle, back in Toronto again. And we haven't had a chance to talk about him since that signing was made. So we'll do that a little bit later when we get into his play. So Dukes was 12 of 18 for 115 yards with a touchdown. Brian Scott was 4 of 8 for 89 yards, and he had a rushing touchdown. And Arbuckle was an astonishing 12 of 13 for 140 and a touchdown. Overall, that's about the number of passes you typically see in a full CFL game. And those numbers are really good, but they're also misleading. So 28 of 39 for 344, 2 touchdowns. You get quarterback play like that in a CFL game, you're thrilled. Those are amazing numbers. JB, why are those numbers so misleading?
Well, I mean, there were certainly a number of times where it looked like there was a sack prior to the ball being released. So I would probably take at least 60 yards off that total.
If not more, but you're right.
Yeah, so there were definitely, I mean, they definitely wanted the benefit of the doubt that the quarterback got the ball off, because in the end, that's what they're looking to see. They don't want to know, can our quarterback be sacked in terms of practice and film. So they did allow plays to continue. I think beyond where a sack had happened, and offenses offenses do love to count plays that don't count in practice.
That's such a defensive minded view of this. That's garbage.
6 seconds in, they throw for a touchdown.
If you're not counting those passes, then you also... So let me go through the rushing stats and let me tell you why JB is sort of full of it here. Because we look at the other side of things. The running backs struggled because of this setup. And so, if we're not counting those 30-yard passes, then we should count the 0-yard runs where a running back was like tapped on the shoulder as a 10-yard carry. So there's a little give and take here. It goes both sides or both ways here. The running back numbers are rough. You got the leading in terms of carries was Deontay McMahon, 4 carries for 10 yards with a long of 4 because someone touched him on the elbow. You got Kadeem Carey had the best day, 3 carries for 30 yards. Most of that came on one 24-yard rush. He got around the outside and really showed deceptive speed. He turned on the jets and guys just didn't have the angle on him. That surprised me a little bit. That wasn't something I was looking for from him per se. Kalen LeBourne, 3 carries, no yards. Isaiah Bowser, 3 carries, 6 yards. And then the quarterbacks each had 1 carry. Arbuckle for 8, Scott for 10, and Dukes for 17. So those rushing stats, JB, if you are taking away my passing numbers, then I'm going to insist that each of these rushing stats be at least doubled, especially for guys like Isaiah Bowser running straight up the middle.
Well, maybe. I don't think teams are going to find abundant success running up the middle against Toronto this year. And I was surprised that they didn't run more edge stuff. The defense was clearly flying with their hair on fire. And I think that, you probably could have stretched them out a little bit, but I don't think they were terribly interested in imaginary runs against imaginary defense, other than, the occasion, other than to kind of have the image of it being a football game.
Were you surprised at the number of blitzes sent? I know we're sort of off script here, but I was.
I liked it. I know I have been in conversations with people where they did not enjoy the defense. I know we've been at a game where a team sent blitzes that we were not ready to pick up. That was not the Argos issue, but I agree with it. I mean, I think it's important for the offense to see heat and to study why Heat wasn't picked up. So even though, you might argue, well, we're moving guys in and out, and the calls weren't in, and we have a different center, and it's harder for the offense to have all those calls in, and the defense is taking advantage of that. I do think looking at I was really happy to see it. Looking at the blitzes, really, there clearly seemed to be an issue with shifting or sliding to the blitzer, because 4 or 5 times it was just a free run to the quarterback, and a couple of times the quarterback ran underneath it, but the rusher had an absolutely free run to the quarterback, and that's concerning, but I think relatively easily fixed.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I love seeing that, actually. Like at this level, this stage, they got a real game in a couple of days where they're going to have to be protecting Deuce, Scott, Arbuckle, and so you want to see every manner of blitz you can. You want that on tape because you've got to look over it, and so. There were miscommunications. I think it was more late communication. That's what it seemed like to me, not having had a chance to go back and watch video because it doesn't exist for us. But that's what it looked like watching it live, that it was just a little bit late. And I think that's partly a function of, well, they didn't have their full line out there at any point.
It didn't feel like they were bringing blitzes from, like late or from safety or from the secondary. I mean, they were just simply overloading the line. And
there were Sam blitzes. The line Sam blitzes and some linebacker blitzes.
The line just simply wasn't picking up that there was an extra guy like on the line who looked like he was coming.
It looked like that to me. Yeah. I guess there were a couple late blitzes, but or like green dogs where running back stays in and so they come too. But I didn't really see anything too exotic, but it was just a relentless stream of blitzes. There were a lot of blitzes coming. And I'm not too worried about that, but you have a mix of guys in and out. Isaiah Cage didn't play in this game. He's healthy, but they sat him for this game. Same with Dave Ungerer at receiver. And Jake Ceresna also sat for this game. Those 3 guys didn't get any reps. Pretty much everyone else got in, but it's just a mix and match. You got guys in and out all over the place. It was so hard for us to try and keep track of who's in now, who's lined up at wideout, who's the right guard right now, because it just kept rotating. And along with that comes a difficulty in communication. If you've got that constant turnover at every positional group, you're going to have trouble with communication. You might have trouble picking up blitzes. So I wasn't too worried about that, but it was interesting to watch, certainly. Let me just finish the receiver stats, and then we'll get more into those conversation topics. But for receivers, Chenga Hodge had a huge day, 6 catches, 83 yards. He was used very effectively. He proved himself. Really nice day for him, and it's going to be a tight battle for backup receivers, especially in the American spots. It is going to be really tough. So, yeah, that was a really nice day for Chenga Hodge. Dejan Brissett, 5 catches, 35 yards, including a spectacular one-hander that got a couple oohs and ahs from the crowd. He always seems to put a catch like that in somewhere. Richie Sindani, 4 catches, 114 yards, including a 61-yarder, but he may have lost the ball twice. He definitely lost it once. I wasn't sure quite what happened on the first one. It was after that 61-yarder. It looked like it got punched free. And
it was definitely punched free.
The officials still gave the ball to the offense, but I feel pretty sure
I think maybe they felt the punch was late.
Yeah, but I don't know. And it looked like Sindani may have slowed down. Again, it's weird. It's not a real game, so there's stuff that's off here. And then the second one, it got punched out near the sideline as well, and it looked like the defense just batted it before it went out of bounds, and that would have been a defensive ball too. So I think those were 2 turnovers, both on Sindani, but he had a great game. He had an amazing catch. It was like a 30-yarder that Arbuckle threw, and then that great route that got him open in deep behind coverage that Byron Scott hit him on. So great day for Sindani, but they're going to be going over ball protection this week for sure. And that's not really something I've seen as an issue with him, but yeah, what a nice outing for him otherwise. The rest of the guys going through it, DeVaris Daniels, 3 catches, 39 yards, including a 30-yard touchdown, which was just a thing of beauty. It was a corner route. I think he beat Tunde Adeleke on the play, and that was Cameron Dukes that just found him right at the pylon. It was a perfect throw. Dukes bought a bit more time to make that one happen. Justin Marshall, 1 catch, 7 yards. Deontay McMahon, 2 catches, 21. Kevin Mattal, 2 catches for 9. He's the rookie. That's the first round draft pick. Only 2 catches, but he has been banged up training camp, so he hasn't had a chance to play as much. Both catches were for first downs. They're both clutch. Kadeem Carey had a catch for 11. He looked great on that. They didn't use him a ton as a receiver in Calgary, but I think he might be used a bit more in that regard out here. Trey Shropshire, 2 catches for 10. Laybourne, 1 catch for 10. Tommy Nild, 1 catch for 5. In total, that's your 344 yards. JB, how many defensive stats do you have?
Well, I mean, it was difficult to tell who was involved in the running.
It's impossible. It's impossible.
Tackles because it wasn't thud, and the referees were essentially blowing it down with the one-hand touch, and then the running back was usually 2 yards past where the one-hand touch had happened, so it could have been any number of players on that. So, I would say the defensive line and the linebackers definitely did not get like a ton of identification in terms of who had the individual tackle because it wasn't thud. So they were allowing simply, okay, there seemed to be a lot of defensive guys there. That probably would have been a tackle. Seemed to be the order of the day.
Well, especially because they blew the whistles so late too. Like the running back would run for like 12 yards, and then there'd be a whistle, and they spot it as a 1 yard gain.
It was kind of a weird, like very light tackle was accepted, but like after the fact.
Yeah.
Like defensively, McFadden had the most tackles. He was cleaning up a lot of that underneath stuff that, we'll talk about that might be a little problematic. I thought Robbie Smith looked great. He looked fast. Parrish looked fast off the edge, had great lean. Really got low. I think that he is everything that we were hoping. He is going to be a problem off the edge, for teams to deal with. There weren't a lot of deep passes, so there weren't a lot of pass breakups. The player who really kind of jumped out for me in some ways was my guy here. Was Leonard Johnson, number 13. I thought he was flying around the field. I thought he was near the ball. I thought he had some almost pass breakups. He had some tackles, some solo tackles. I thought he was, great. I thought he absolutely, for me, was the defensive back that jumped out at me the most. I thought 13 had a really nice day. Didn't play tons and tons, but when he was on, he was near the ball, and he looked fast. He looked strong. I was really impressed with him. I thought that he's going to be for sure one of the players I look for in the exhibition game because I haven't seen different things. Can he go down the field with players and so forth? He was playing a lot of underneath, but he definitely looked twitchy in that underneath role.
And they've got so many good American DBs on the roster. Like that's what stood out to me because I kind of went in looking for Kerry Vincent and Chris Steele because Hoagie had talked a lot about both of those guys when he was on with us a week ago. And how that was a great battle. You got a USC kid and an LSU kid battling it out at corner. And they, those guys look great, but you also got Muddy Waters out there who looks fantastic. You've got, and you're adding guys to the mix too. There's it's like 5 or 6 legitimate American DB hopefuls there. And they're essentially fighting for one corner spot. Like that's all that's open. As much as we've talked about the losses this offseason for the Toronto Argonauts, it comes down to one cornerback spot because you've got, Metier is going to be at safety. We know we've got Mason Pierce. You've got Deshaun Amos. You've got Tavares McFadden. Quincy Moget, we maybe can talk about him a little bit too.
Yeah,
looked fantastic he looked, at Sam.
He also looked fantastic. He looked fast.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not what I thought from him. Like, that's not what I thought we would see from his game. I did think he would probably win the Sam linebacker spot. I said that when they signed him. I liked his play last year in BC. He can play safety. He can play Sam. And it surprised me that BC didn't do everything they could to retain him. I didn't watch him closely last year in BC, but whenever I saw their games, he stood out to me. So I wasn't surprised by the quality of play. I was surprised by the speed. He looked fast out there. So yeah, that was highly encouraging.
Adeleke looked hurt.
He looked a little banged up. Yeah.
He didn't look. I mean, he had a lot of tape, and he just did not. He did not look 100%, especially on the touchdown. So I'd be surprised if he played in. I'd be surprised if he played in the game. I thought he. I was surprised he played, to be honest.
Yeah, because they usually would sit. Now, maybe that was something where he wasn't banged up, but just sort of tweaked something on that play.
Maybe he tweaked it on that play. Yeah, for sure.
He might have, because he did kind of come up. It looked like he came up a bit lame on that corner route of Tavares Daniels, but he made a nice play in the end zone on the previous drive. He broke up what could have been a touchdown pass from Brian Scott. He got in the way. Could have actually. I thought he was going to pick it, and ended up knocking it down. So, he made some good plays too. And he's a guy we really like as well. But to show you again the depth that somehow the Argos have managed to build, even with all these losses, you might have a gifted player, like an all-star caliber player like Tunde Adeleke on the bench, coming off the bench. And he'll be used a lot in those in sort of dime quarter sets that they run out there on second and long. But what a luxury to be able to bring a guy like that out, or to rotate a guy like that in to like 4 different positions that he can play. So yeah, those DBs are really exciting to watch. All right, we're so far out of order here, JB. Let's get back to quarterback play, and then we'll kind of muddle through stuff as we go. But let's start with, I think, what everyone wants to hear about, what most people want to ask about, is the quarterback play. So Cameron Dukes, Brian Scott, Nick Arbuckle. What were your impressions watching these 3 guys on Monday night?
I mean, my first impression was that they were kind of all very similar. I didn't think anybody, like, they play similar styles, they're similar builds, so it wasn't like a real change between each of them. I thought they played well in terms of there were no interceptions, and a couple of close calls, but I thought they played well in terms of not getting baited into anything or making bad throws, which you often see, in early scrimmages. There was a lot of underneath with Dukes, which is fine, but like that for sure is going to be his Achilles. Teams will eat you alive if they think that all you have is 15 yards and in, and you're gonna throw it to your running back and throw it to the out, and you just can't get away with that. So it was a little. I would have loved to have seen Dukes push the ball down the field more. Those 15-yard, a post or an in, something to back that secondary off so that the secondary is not crouching right behind the linebackers. The old wily vet picked up a couple of busts. He saw the bust immediately, and I think that's the advantage of being a wily vet. On a couple of his deep throws, he immediately saw a bust, and he put it up in the air for his wide receiver, and the wide receiver went and got it. So I think that's what makes him potentially the starting quarterback, is his experience, that he is able to identify a bust or a mistake in the defense that quickly and turn that into a touchdown. And that is a veteran skill.
I'm certainly not ready to crown Arbuckle as the starter or anything like that, but I was impressed with his play. Like you sort of were and weren't, because we talked about this a little bit beforehand, and I'll get into that in a second, but I just want to respond to something that you said just about not being able to push the ball down the field. It's a huge concern. And just to give you an indication, Brian Scott did push the ball. He was the only one of the 3 that actually did open it up a little bit. He had the lowest completion percentage, but he was stretching out the field. He did let go a couple bombs. We didn't really see that from Arbuckle too much. He had a 32-yarder, and he had that touchdown pass to Changa Hodge as well that were both deep-ish. But Dukes only had the one, and it was on an extended play. And so, yeah, I want to see that more. Next time Dukes is out, whether it's I think it's got to be this week in Montreal, but we haven't seen who they're sending, who they're dressing, who they're starting yet. But next time Dukes is out there, I really do want to see him push the ball because, like you said, if you can't stretch the defense out a little bit, it is really hard to play football within the confines of like a 15, 20-yard space. And so he's going to have to learn to stretch that out and maybe take a few chances because he did play it a little bit safe, I think, especially by his standards. Like we saw him last year as a little bit of a gunslinger at times, like not afraid to try and make plays. So I would like to see, maybe he's playing a bit tight, maybe trying not to lose the starting job because he is, I think, the projected starter right now. So maybe he can loosen it up a little bit after he watches this film. Now, back to what you were saying though about maybe not being that surprised by Arbuckle. What is it about bringing in a veteran when you've got two other talented younger guys? What makes a coach gravitate sometimes towards a veteran like Nick Arbuckle?
Well, it's just having somebody who has the answers to your questions. Now, they may not be able to do everything you want them to do, but when you ask a question, they know the answer. And as a coach, that's very reassuring that they are not, that the only thing holding them back is arm talent. But they know what the throw should be, and they know who the play should go to. And from a coach perspective, that is very reassuring when you're going over stuff and that they're understanding immediately what you're talking about and they're identifying the defense immediately. That's what makes it hard to beat out a veteran unless you have special arm talent that sort of wins the argument. So I do think, like, it's nothing against Dukes, or Scott. I think it's not a fair fight, that Arbuckle knows the answers to the test. And so that's going to be hard to convince a coach to go with somebody. Coaches are risk adverse. And, there's nothing more risk adverse than, somebody who knows what they're supposed to do. Now, are they able to do it? Well, that's the difference between, making $300,000 and not.
And it's a really tough call as a coach. I've been in that position as well, where I've got two guys, a guy that just graduated from university and can run a 4.4, but doesn't necessarily know the position that well yet, or isn't fully acclimated to it, and a 40-year-old guy who's been playing for a long time and can make all the reads, but doesn't necessarily have the same zip on the ball or the threat to run it. And, there's something really nice about a guy that's just never going to make a mistake. But at the same time, the younger guy that brings you that excitement and that big score possibility, the big play from anywhere on the field possibility, that's alluring too. And so I don't envy the decision that Coach Dinwiddie's going to make here. I think he's ultimately going to end up just sticking with Dukes because I think, that was the plan. And I think you're going to see this through preseason unless Arbuckle comes and just blows the doors off everybody in preseason. Or unless Brian Scott does the same thing. I just think it's going to be Dukes that is at least given a run with it. For that first game, that first week against BC.
No, yeah, I think he's earned his chance. And preseason will be huge. I think Dukes has to have a good preseason to remain starter, not just average. I think he has to be good, or he will not be the starter.
And I just think he has to not blow it. Like, I think if he's fine, they'll still go with him to start, just because I think there is sort of an expectation, and, having kind of made this decision already, I think unless it's an extreme difference, I actually think it'll be the Dukes that starts no matter what, at least for the first game. But I don't expect an overly long leash if the other guys have played really well leading up. In terms of those three guys, I don't know if I see, like, I think Brian Scott and Nick Arbuckle, I do have that same sort of style of play. Dukes, I see as a little bit different style-wise, but he didn't necessarily look as scrambly, maybe as we saw him a little bit last year. He seems to have settled a little bit. And I'd say that with Brian Scott too. You and I had a chance to talk to Brian Scott after the game, and he was saying just how much easier it is year two. He talked about just, the difficulty in picking up the extra safety in your first year. You just arrived from the States, you're thrown into training camp and everything's live, and you've got an extra player on defense, and it's super tough. But I felt like we saw a lot more, it was just a bit more calm from both Dukes and Scott.
I thought the quarterbacks looked better than they did last year in this game. Kelly obviously looked great last year, but I thought the two guys looked, Scott and Dukes both looked calmer, and it wasn't immediately apparent which quarterback was in when you were watching the offense. You had to actually kind of like do a double check to see which number was in, which is a good sign, I thought, in terms of the moving the ball down the field. Is that it felt like they were less yeah, I think exactly to say less frantic than last year, and no picks.
Yeah, smart decisions, right? But I almost think, like, to me, like we said a bit earlier, like I feel like I would rather see just a bit more risk taking. But maybe that's not the plan. Like, this is a good defense. This is going to be a good defense. Maybe the plan is to play low risk. Maybe that's what Dinwiddie wants, is let's play low risk football. Let's not turn the ball over. We'll score, because this was like, looking at the drive summary. I should bring it up here just to go over our drive summary from the game. But it was field goal heavy, certainly, or field goal attempt heavy. If I read you through the order of drives here, so you had 15 total drives. You had field goal, a turnover on downs, punt, field goal, missed field goal, punt, field goal, touchdown, punt, touchdown, punt, field goal, touchdown, with 2-point conversions. So it ended up with 3 touchdowns, and there's also a special teams touchdown, which we'll get to in a minute too. But there were a lot of drives that moved a little bit, but ended in a pretty long field goal. But
I completely agree. If you look at their punter kicker combo, I'm sure the coaches feel incredibly comfortable punting and using their punter as a weapon, and field goal kicks from 45 and out. I think that they are strong there, and everything is built to be conservative.
I'm sort of surprised when I'm thinking about this, is to like just how many spots are basically nailed down right now in terms of who's going to start week 1. There's just not a lot up for grab, which is encouraging to see. That's what that's what you expect to see from a good team. The Argos were a lot like that last year. There just weren't a lot of moving parts. We knew kind of where everyone was going to be. When you look at the offense, I know we didn't see Isaiah Cage out there at left tackle, but we know what that is going to be left to right with Cage and Ryan Hunter, Sirocco, Nicastro, and Dejon Allen. Like, that's going to be your 5-0 lineman. We think Dukes is probably going to be the starting quarterback. Kadeem Carey is going to be your starting running back. We know that it's going to be DeMonte Coxie, DeVaris Daniels on the boundary side. It seems like Rasheed Bailey is going to be playing that R spot, that inside receiver spot. And it seems like Dave Ungerer, who's had one of the best camps of everybody, Mike Hogan was saying, he's written about that in his articles as well, just how well Dave Ungerer has played this year. He's probably outside at Z. And so maybe the only battle is Dejan Brissett and Tommy Neild. And I don't even know if I think of that as a battle, because I think they both have different skill sets that you can use interchangeably depending on what you need. Whether or not you need speed, whether or not you need box out, whether or not you need possession, whether or not you need something over the middle. Like, you can use those guys as you see fit. So like, that's the offense. Like, the other guys we know, Adebaboye is obviously going to get in there too, and they're going to change that up. They have backups obviously getting guys spells, but that's your starting offense. One job kind of up. And the defense isn't that different. One of the questions we had was Sam, but we know Quincy Moget seems to have separated himself. And then we wanted to make sure that, are we comfortable with Jonathan Jones as a starter? JB, are you comfortable with Jonathan Jones starting at will? Because that seems to be where he was playing most of his snaps.
Yeah, no, I think he's shown himself to be a starter in the CFL. I think that's perfectly fine.
I thought he looked great. I actually thought he looked really
I think
good.
he is a very good football player. Like, I don't think he's going to be a CFL All-Star, but that's fine. I think he's a very good football player. I think that's and he has, he works well with McManus, and they know what each other are doing. I think he's underrated, probably simply because he's not so flashy.
Yeah, very. I know he's just seems to always be in the right position. He had a pass breakup. It was he and Mason Pierce were basically double teaming somebody across the field, and for whatever reason the ball was thrown that way, and Jones Jones got his hand on it.
Not a great read.
That wasn't the best one. No, that was probably the worst read of that. I don't remember who that one was, but Jones knocked
the
that
red
one down.
zone. The red zone was not a polished jewel yet either.
But it's a tough D. It's a really tough red zone D, and they get such pressure, and that's without Serezna in there too. Like if Robbie Smith can look the way that he did coming off the edge, and then you've got Brinkman rotating in. Brinkman was a load as well. Actually, the defensive interior in general, I thought played really nice. They weren't able, like guys were able to anchor on the O line. They weren't getting bull rush back. But there was disruption certainly from that interior. And we haven't really seen Arimolade full go yet. But yeah, you start rotating Arimolade and Parrish and Robbie Smith playing like that. This is a good D. McManus and Jones looked like they've been playing together for a decade. Sorry, what were you saying?
I said, and Serezna, like there's a lot of talent there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then Mojay rounding out that backer group, and all these great looking young American kids fighting it out for that last corner spot. The defense is going to be good. So like you said, maybe that is how you shape the season. Maybe that's how you approach that first 9 games is our defense is going to keep us in it. We can't blow it. If we get field goals like Aralahu was hitting from deep, hit a 48-yarder, 38-yarder, or 48-yarder, went 2 for 2, actually punted the ball well as well. So yeah, you'll be in a lot of games just based on that alone. So just don't make mistakes, don't turn the ball over. That's not necessarily the same style of football we were accustomed to seeing last year. That wasn't the philosophy, but maybe that's the way that you win football games in the first half of the season if you're the Argos this year. JB, let's talk a little bit about that special teams unit. So maybe we can start with that touchdown because this is such a classic CFL training camp thing. You don't see this. You don't usually see this by the time you get to games, but it happens at least once to somebody in preseason or in practice. And here we got to see it in the double blue game. There are so many different rules between American and Canadian football, a lot of them on special teams play. And here was a kickoff where you had, I think it was Zay Malone was deep. I can't remember who Zay Malone was deep with. It was Jordan Bird. The two guys were deep. And I think it was Haralah who kicked it right in between them. Veteran move, right between the two guys. Lands right at the goal line. And they sort of watch it bounce into the end zone. And they start jogging back to the bench. Plays over. But 20-yard end zones. Ball's not blown dead. The team rushes down there, and one of the Bullet players, Jonathan Edouard, jumps on the ball in the end zone, and it's a touchdown for the kicking team. And that's just one of those things. It's one of those instances where those guys have to learn those rules and when the play will be blown dead and some of the intricacies of being back there as a returner. Because there's some weird ones involving rouges and kicks that go out of bounds and stuff like that. So that's something that they'll be able to do. I know Mickey Donovan will take those guys, they'll watch film, they'll talk about it as a group, but what a great example. It's unfortunate for them that it was in front of fans when it happens, but good on Edouard for jumping on that ball and scoring 6 for the special teams unit. What else do you see from the special teams unit? We had, in terms of Gachuz and Haggerty, Haralahu.
Haggerty looked great. I didn't love the ball off Gachuz's foot. But that's neither here nor there really. He's not the starter, so I think he's fine. Obviously, you're not going to get any punt return, kick return looks in the game. But I was happy with the field goal. I thought field goal conversion was nice, and I thought Haggerty, hit a couple of beautiful punts. And to have the kicker be able to make a great punt too, was obviously a nice weapon to have in case you need it. Yeah. So from a kicking perspective, I thought they looked set.
Yeah, I thought so too. And I'm excited. That's one of the things I am excited to see is because the reason we didn't get a chance to see kickoff returns is because while they've got the returners back there, they don't actually have the upfield blocking. That's not set. And so That's why we weren't able to actually see Bird and Malone return. Like they did return a couple, but with nobody blocking. Obviously, you don't get very far. But Malone, like, he's a 4-3 guy. He spent some time in the NFL as well. I think he was with the Falcons, and so there's speed there. There's excitement there. That's something that I'm looking forward to seeing in Montreal. And with that said, let's fast forward to Saturday. JB, what's your plan heading into Montreal Saturday night? Who do you bring with you if you're Coach Dinwiddie? Who do you put out there? Who do you want to see?
Yeah, I probably would lean against bringing many starters. Your roster is, even with all the changes, the core of your roster is still very set. So I think you're probably really looking at, I don't know, 7 or 8 decisions max, probably on this roster. So you definitely want to see the 12 or 13 guys who you have narrowed down for those 6 decisions. And then you just bring other guys to kind of fill out the roster. I would say you're probably looking at 10 guys. I don't think this game I would put just above sort of an elevated practice. I don't think you're concerned about the score or really doing much other than very vanilla football. I think you just want to see, even in vanilla football, are guys able to execute a plan? Are guys able to make, essentially you're testing fundamentals, right? Like, how well is this route run? How good are the hands to let the ball get in on them defensively? How strong is the tackle after the catch? How close are they to the receiver that they're covering? Did they run cover 2 properly? Did they run cover 3 properly? I think you're looking at those guys at the bottom of the roster cannot make fundamental mistakes. They don't get that. If you're a star, you get a little more leeway with making mistakes. But those guys, you need to have those guys be absolutely rock solid in those areas. So I think it is interesting to watch, but I wouldn't bring many of the starters. I don't see any point really. You know what you have with them. You really just want to test. You want to test, those new secondary guys. You want to test all those new receivers.
And teams don't typically bring a lot of those starters on the road in preseason. We just saw Winnipeg at Saskatchewan. Winnipeg brought nobody with them. It was a lot of those guys battling for practice roster spots. But that's where I think special teams is really key in this game, because I do think that's where you're going to see guys separate themselves. Because like we said, we know who the starters are, but the backups are going to have to be your special team key players, your special team studs. And so you bring all those guys, and this is their showcase. This is a chance to see every punt, every kickoff.
Yeah, sorry, especially at wide receiver.
Yeah,
right.
All the key
like there. Where like if you are 6, 7, 8 in the wide receiver room, you have to be a great special teamer, and that's where guys who seemingly are more talented don't get picked, because you have to be a great special teamer as a wide receiver.
The reason for that, if you're not following along with that, like why a guy that's more talented wouldn't necessarily be a great special teamer. Often those guys didn't really get a chance to play teams other than if they were the return man, because they were the stars of their schools in high school and college. And so they get up here having maybe been a deep man as a returner, but not necessarily having done any blocking, not necessarily having done anything else, any other role on special teams, not having been a gunner, not having played those snaps.
If you watch American college football, I mean, there's like 400 people on the sideline.
Right.
Like they don't have any roster limits. I mean, they just have endless guys to do different things. So like if you were, as many of these guys were, a star in Div 1 football, like you did not have to worry about being on any special team.
Yeah, it just wasn't. I love that. I know. Just sometimes I remember you and I. This is years ago. You and I watching. I think it was Alabama LSU years ago, and like 2 corners went down, and the guy they brought in, they were talking about as being like one of the best players in the country, and this is like the 3rd guy off the bench at corner.
Yeah,
and
I mean, they just had
that's
endless,
what they got.
endless players to bring off the bench. Like they dressed like 85 players or something.
So in terms of quarterbacks this week, what do you do with Duke's Scott Arbuckle in terms of reps? Do you bring them all? Do they all play in Montreal?
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting. I think as we saw last year, I think it probably tips the hand a little. Um, like we thought Brian Scott was going to get more run in that exhibition game than he did. Where they clearly were like leaning more towards Dukes. Yeah, I don't. It's hard to say. Like you don't want guys behind an offensive line that is not up to par, and the twos and threes at the offensive line. That's a bigger drop off than it is at other positions. From starter to backup. Uh, and you never know. Like Montreal might bring all kinds of heat. They're at home. Hamilton did last year. Montreal's at home. They might want to rack up 10 sacks just to be Montreal playing at home. And so you don't want to get anybody hurt. I mean, I would love to see Dukes. I'd love to see Dukes more in game two. I probably am Dukes for a quarter, Arbuckle for a quarter, and Scott for the whole second half, I think, if I were to do this game.
I'd probably do it the other way around because I kind of think, I feel like you know more about what Arbuckle is. I think you're less interested in seeing Arbuckle right now. I think you're really looking at Dukes and Scott. But I don't know, like, because like you said, I don't know that you can. I don't know that if you are playing Dukes, and again, it's so tough when you don't know who your guys, because like if Chad Kelly were playing, for example, you would say, well, he doesn't play in this game. But I don't think you can do that with any of these three guys. I don't think Dukes has enough experience, Scott either.
I think,
so
yeah, you need more
they've all got to play. But can you play them behind your second and third offensive line units for a guy that you're hoping to be your starter? That's usually you wouldn't. You'd never put Kelly out there behind the second or third string offensive line. Can you do that with Dukes, Scott, Arbuckle?
Can you email Montreal and ask them not to blitz?
Yeah, please. Just in your pregame meeting. Hey guys, how about no blitzes? I know it's your first game since winning the Grey Cup, and you're here at home.
Pro Bowl rules.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
they could
no
use
blitzes,
that.
please.
That'd be nice. That'd be great. But that's not going to happen. So,
well, look, there's only so much risk aversion or risk control that you can have. Guys get hurt getting out of showers and stuff. I think you just have to play, and
that literally happened last year in training camp. That's a little bit too soon, JB.
Well, I mean, I think you have to play them behind that line, and and hope that Montreal doesn't like send 9 over and over again.
Yeah, and
which honestly would be a pretty. I mean, you're allowed to, but
Montreal's trying to assess.
I think that would be a pretty disrespectful. A pretty disrespectful thing, to be honest with you, because like that's not what this game is for, and really you're not, So I think you put in. I think you can keep them for the first half, and then, Scott will have the harder job with the weaker line in the second half. But then you kind of see what you got.
I think Scott's going to get. I think he's going to be second man up. Like he was clearly second man in the double blue game. Like it was very clear in terms of the number of possessions they got. It was Dukes, Scott, Arbuckle as the third. Now Arbuckle had been in camp for 2 days, but we'll see. Like because that would be a big indicator if that changes. For this game, if Arbuckle does come in second, then I think there is a message there. I think there is.
Or if Dukes doesn't start and Arbuckle starts.
But I don't know if that means as much because you're on the road. So it depends. It depends on.
I would say, like ironically, if Arbuckle started and Dukes didn't, I would say that is a stronger vote in favor of Dukes.
In favor of Dukes, if Arbuckle starts.
Yeah, if Dukes doesn't start, I think what they're saying is
like he's our guy.
He's our guy.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
that's what you would do with your starter.
Yeah, no, I can see that. That makes sense to me as well. So yeah, we'll see, and we'll know. You might even know by the time you're listening to this podcast how that's going to break down. But yeah, there's lots of stuff to look forward to. I'll be there in Montreal, and
congratulations on being named part of the broadcast crew again, the radio broadcast.
Oh, thank you. I do appreciate that. So yeah, I'll be. We're not doing the broadcast for this game, but we will be doing the broadcast for Mike Hogan and I will be doing the broadcast for the Argos home game coming up next week. Friday night against the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and we'll be there all year for you as well. So you do have to tune in for that. But I will be in Montreal for this game, not doing the broadcast, but enjoying the game nevertheless. And we're not going to have a post-game reaction pod for this game, but they will start after the Guelph preseason game number 2 against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. We'll bring you our post-game reaction pod. And then from then on in, that's it. Post-game reaction pods and our pregame walkthroughs. You'll be getting 2 podcasts a week, except for bye weeks. So the season is here for all intents and purposes, JB. Can't wait to start recording some post-game reaction pods and have real football to talk about. So our next pod will come to you next week, where we will break down everything that we saw in that Montreal game. And then we will get you set for preseason game number 2, which will be pretty close upon with the Friday start. So it'll be midweek next week, where we will review one and get you set for the other.
I'm certainly very excited to refill my golden fleeces.
Yeah, we'll refill all your golden fleeces. We'll get all our usual segments up and running with our first pregame walkthrough of the year. That's still a little ways away, but it starts feeling a little bit more routine the further into preseason that we get. That will just about do it for us on this preseason edition of the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Together, fight the foe.